in the epistle and apostle reading today, the gospel reading today, we heard some really important things, which I'm sure you have heard before. The first one from the gospel about this very rich young man who came and wanted to know how to enter the kingdom of heaven. And the Lord said, be keeping the commandments, which he said he did, but he lacked one thing in the fact that he was very rich. And when he heard that the Lord said, sell that and go and give to the poor, that grieved him very greatly, and he could not take it. The Lord does not expect us not to have riches if that is the way our life turns. But what he does expect of us is not to be bound by these things to the earthly realm. Those who do have these riches indeed often are so bound to them that it is very, very difficult for them to walk the righteous way, because so many temptations are open to those who can afford them in their life. And this is why in this particular passage the Lord is so strict about this, saying that sell everything that you have and come and follow me. And you know that many people have indeed done this, living in monasteries or deserts or other places as such. Even kings have done this, and emperors. So it's not something that is beyond human beings' strength. But again, I repeat that the Lord does not prevent us having riches, but not to be bound by any of those sorts of things or anything worldly. And we as Orthodox Christians need to, in our own life, examine carefully, are we bound to anything in this world? Perhaps it's not riches, perhaps it's something else. Because if you are bound to it, addicted to it, a victim of it, then that carries through into the next life. And it's a suffering which needs to be somehow redeemed while we are here, repented and changed in our life. The other part of the reading today from the epistle was very important, because it once again consolidates for us the need to follow that which is being taught by the church, rather than by all these sort of different ideas that float around in the air, particularly in our time where media is so powerful and we can get information of almost anything. The strange thing about this, as I often tell you, is that despite this ability to find out about things, almost anything, it seems that people still do not seem to be able to find out about the truth, which is rather weird, some sort of paradox. There it is out there, and yet people somehow, and I'm talking about Orthodox people, sort of still question. They question, well, you know, if you tell them that the apostles died in a certain way, they go, how do you know that? Or if you tell them something from the life of Christ or the saints, how do you know that? They say, you know, obviously they are not looking into that information in their lives and therefore not progressing spiritually. The period which I was particularly interested in, which I've mentioned over the past few weeks, when the world came out of the so-called Dark Ages and came into what was known as the Enlightenment, the Renaissance and all those sort of areas, brought forth these people that were called philosophers. And as I've said before, that word philosophy comes from Greek words, Greek roots meaning philo, love, and sophia, wisdom. So love of wisdom. And we know that wisdom is Christ, because truth, wisdom, comes from Christ. It's seeing things as they really are. That's what it is. That's what we all see. We want to know things as they really are. Then we have wisdom. Then we have understanding. Then we can walk a path which is rejecting temptations and all the enticements which pull us away from a righteous life. That's wisdom. But these philosophers that came into existence around the 1700s and later on, which were the forerunners of what we call scientists today, actually started to go to such an extent with their minds and their so-called rationalism, which was the age of enlightenment, that they rationalized out of the gospel and out of the teaching of the church anything to do with miracles or the higher things that God has given us, to the point that they even rejected that Christ was God, just the man, or some sort of special creature created by God. What does that bring us back to? That same idea that, I hate to say it, the Hebrews believe in some sort of blob in the cosmos which they call God, which has no personality, is not personal to us. We can't relate to him or her or it, whatever it is, and therefore, where does that leave us? That was the struggle that the Old Testament people had. They couldn't relate to who was God. When Moses came into the mountain and saw the burning bush, as God spoke to him, he said, well, who do I say you are? Who do I say sent me to my people? And the Lord said, tell them that I am. And I am was the Hebrew word then for God, and it was not allowed to be uttered as such in public because they considered that some sort of blasphemy. But when Christ came, he also called himself I am, if you read the Gospels. But he now came as a person, a personality, and as a man, and as God himself, to bring us unto his fold. From these philosophers, of course, we come to the opening of the 20th century, where they started to be called scientists because they were examining matter so much, the created matter. And only a scientific sort of mind can examine that part. But again, they went to such an extent that rationalizing away anything to do with miraculous experiences, even in the Gospels, even in the Bible, they try to say that these things are either just good stories or that there's some sort of natural thing that occurred that can be explained scientifically. Maybe not right now, but in the future. The Star of Bethlehem is a perfect example, which I've told you many times. Either it was a comet, a star, or some phenomena in the sky. Where's the saints say quite plainly? It was an angel of the Lord. It was an angel of the Lord. You know, the dry land that Moses led his people through, the Red Sea, was supposed to be some wind that opened up the reeds and they walked through. No, it was a real big miraculous phenomena that occurred. And nothing in the natural can explain those sorts of things. And if you read some of the biographies of these scientists, which again I've said to you on occasion, which now form the basis of our education in the West, without a doubt, almost all of them, 99% of them, are unbelievers in Christianity. Some of them believe in a God, but again, it's this sort of blob somewhere in the cosmos which has no personality, no real rapport with human beings. We can't relate to him, her, or it, as they say. And they even, well, if you take their argument to the full extent, it really comes down to that nature is God. Even the famous founding father of the Americas, Samuel Adams, was so in depth with all this. Although he called himself a Christian, he said that I have become a sect to myself. In other words, he's created his own idea of what the Bible should be. And they actually rewrote the Bible. So all this great stuff about the Americas being founded by Christian people overall is quite a lie. It's not a truth. And we see that now as the decades go by, the centuries go by, how things are tumbling further and further and further into darkness, economically, spiritually, materialistically, nationally, whichever way you want to look at it. There seems to be no hope in any of those sorts of things. Our Lord Jesus Christ, of course, will resurrect truth and righteousness for those who want it, and will show it to them plainly, as long as they strive after it and pray after it. And therefore, we as Orthodox Christians need not lament or be fussed about all these things, or grieved, or fall into despondency, because we know that to us that salvation will open up no matter what sort of difficulties occur around the world. And that's important, to keep that light burning in our hearts and in our lives, and perhaps ignite, when we can, the lights of others. God bless us with this very awesome and difficult work, but it's through this work that we bring forth fruit. In other words, our faith not only is one of belief, but of works as well, works that bring forth fruit for our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.